Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down. This is my guitar. If you're just joining us, this is week 5 in a series looking at my favourite things by Kenny Burrell. It's taken from his album from 1967 called Soulero. My Favourite Things is a tune that you'll probably know from the classic movie Sound of Music. That's where it's made most famous. In the jazz world, it's made most famous by John Coltrane's seminal album from 1961. Both versions are worth listening to. This one's quite unique in the fact that it's slightly more funky and is in 4/4 as well. So go back to week 1 if you want to learn... go back to week 2 if you want to learn why it's in 4/4 and how we go about changing tunes that are in 3/4 to 4/4, as that's a really interesting week to take a look at. As always, I'm going to be transcribing the entire tune, or Kenny's part of it anyway. So far we've looked at the chord melody opening, which he does on his own, and then we've looked at the head, and then we also started the solo last week as well. This week, we're going to be continuing on with the solo and looking at the next 16 bars of the solo. Before we continue, I just want to say a big thanks to my patrons. 4 of you who've signed up this week: Greg, Hans Christian, Eduardo, and David. Thanks, guys, for your support. It really means a lot. Patreon is the place to go if you want to get the transcription of the solo and the backing track that I made with Joe Harris, Jamie Sefton, and Josh Moon. And if you want to get also all of the exercises and scales, chords, lick packs that I put on here that go along with this series that help you to be able to digest the tune and unpack what Kenny's doing so you can use his techniques, whether that's harmonic, melodic, rhythmic, or technically in the left and right hand. I've put some exercises in there to help you digest it and use some of this stuff in your own playing. So head over to Patreon. The link is here if you want to do that. First tier gets you all of those little bits. The second tier, you get all of that and you get to request a transcription. And then the third tier, you get all of that again, and you also get access to me for an hour a month to give you a one-to-one on Zoom. If you don't want to subscribe to something, then you can buy me a coffee below if you want to show your appreciation financially. And if not, you can show your appreciation by just hitting that subscribe button and the like button, and drop me a comment if you've got a question. So let's jump into the next 16 bars of the solo. I've cut it up into 2 for this week, so here's 8 bars of it. Okay, so harmonically, it's not particularly difficult, and we're using the minor pentatonic here, the E minor pentatonic, which is this. And, you know, this is probably going to be fairly obvious to a lot of you that are watching this. The E minor pentatonic in the 12th position. This is the one that we learn when we first learn guitar. So it's not massively out there. But what Kenny's doing with it is the most interesting thing. And it's really useful to make sure that you go over it so that you know it, and that you know exactly where all of the notes are, and also some more different positions as well, so that you can use some of Kenny's ideas, but further down the neck or further up the neck. So make sure you're learning the other 4 positions that we know from the cage system. And also, as I always say on this channel, make sure you learn it laterally up the neck as well. Okay? Because this allows you to be able to connect all of the different caged positions together and not interrupt your melody. So it doesn't sound like you're playing in one position all of the time and then all of a sudden you shift to another position. You can actually connect them together. So we've got the minor pentatonic here, and that's basically the palette that Kenny's painting with. Now, the opening thing that he does here is with what we call dyads, which is where you've got 2 notes played at the same time, or double stop sometimes it's called. And what he plays here is... Okay. The dyads that Kenny uses are these. So he's got D and B together, and also B and E together. Okay. Now these ones are ones that you'll hear an awful lot between people like Kenny Burrell and Wes Montgomery and also George Benson. You hear them an awful lot. They crop up a lot in jazz guitarists' arsenal of licks to play, and usually it's in something that's quite bluesy. Now, how we get to these, and how we get to even more of these dyads, is interesting, because basically what it is just a harmonized minor scale. So it's an E minor scale, and then harmonizing it on 2 strings. So like this. Now, we don't want to use all of them, okay? Not all of them sound bluesy, but these particular ones, they sound particularly bluesy and are really useful in a tune like this or in a blues, okay? So here's a little lick that you can learn using some of those dyads. Now, it's fairly melismatic. There's a lot of sliding going on there. You don't have to use all of that. As with all of the stuff that I put up on here, I always say it's useful to learn it and then to try changing it a little bit, changing one note here and there. Maybe start the lick in a different part of the bar. Maybe start it on beat 2 or beat 3 or beat 4. And then as you do that, gradually the lick will change and you'll get a lot more creative with it, and it will become something that is your own, rather than you just playing what I'm playing parrot fashion. So that's the lick that he plays. Now the next place where he uses double stops is 4 bars into this section, where he plays 2 notes on the B and the E string on the 12th fret, and he slides into it from below. Okay, now this is fourths rather than thirds, which is what we used just a second ago. You can convert your minor pentatonic scale into fourths with 1/3 in it as well. It's just the way the scale works out that you have to use a third in there as well. But you can make that on the top 2 strings, the minor pentatonic into fourths by just playing this. So open 2 strings, and then bar across the first 2 strings on the 3rd fret, then on the 5th fret. And then you'd have to do thirds, so you'd have to put first finger on the 7th fret and then second finger on the 8th fret on the 1st and 2nd strings respectively, just to accommodate that third. And then fourths, again, 10th fret, barring across the top 2 strings, and then going back up to the 12th fret. And obviously carry that on 15th fret, 17th fret, 19th and 20th fret, and that's as far as I can get here. So you've got those options open to you. Kenny just slides into the 12th. And you'll notice that that's kind of thing that he does quite often, and George Benson does it quite a bit as well. Okay, so this is quite a well-used, well-trodden technique to use, using double stops in a bluesy solo. So I suggest you take the whole scale that I've harmonized, the fourths with the 3rd, and also the thirds as well that we put in as well on the 3rd and 2nd string. Okay, and use some of those and use that example that I put in here as well. Okay, so the next 4 bars of this 8-bar section here, we've got more pentatonic action, so nothing particularly difficult. So coming out of the top of that, okay, just running down the minor pentatonic, and then we've got our familiar friend from the last 16 bars of the solo from the last episode, this melismatic line. Okay, so we've got that little line there. Okay, so make sure on this one it's slightly different. He's picking, so you'll pick on the 14th fret, then pick on the 15th fret for the blue note, and then pull off to the 14 to the 12. Okay, so okay, like that, and then going back down to the or back up, sorry, to the 14th fret. Okay, so okay, making sure that you're swinging it. Finishing off the phrase in the next bar there. So you can see, as I mentioned in the last episode, we talked about this line coming back. And it's really useful to make sure that you're learning it, that you know what the notes are, that you've got that triplet idea on the second half of the first beat. Okay, and it's usually always using some kind of legato, and that was a bit rubbish, but okay, with a slide or with a double pick, picking on the A and then also on the B flat on the blue note. Okay, so there's a myriad of different ways that Kenny actually executes this with legato, but it's the same notes each time and the same rhythm. So it's worth making sure that you've learnt it properly and, you know, try and use it in your own playing and just move it around on the guitar. Okay, so let's move into the second half and let's look at the next 8 bars. Okay, so this next 8 bars, again, it's more kind of pentatonic ideas. We've got that melismatic line coming back again towards the end of it. There's nothing massively, you know, kind of interesting in here apart from just his phrasing. The harmonic content here is purely minor pentatonic and also using the blues scale as well. He does move the minor pentatonic up into the next position. If you're a caged system user, you'll know it as the D position, or you might see it as 5th position if you use the number system. So the 5th position of the minor pentatonic is this. And then we've also got the blues scale as well, which is this. And the line starts with, okay, we've got a quarter tone bend there, okay? So this is a bend that is in between the 15th and the 16th fret. So check the 15th fret, check the 16th fret, and you want to basically bend in between the two, like that. So, okay, it's known as a blues curl or a quarter tone bend. It's notated as a quarter tone bend. So just make sure that you're checking every time you bend, check where you're bending to or in relation to. And then he carries it on. Okay, now this is a cool little line. I like this line. So he's using the 5th position of the minor pentatonic, which you might know. Starts at the top. Okay, so it goes down and then goes back up again. And then further down. So it's kind of like going down to go back up again to go down further again. So Kenny's phrasing here is something worth talking about here. Although the harmonic element is not particularly interesting, it's just E minor pentatonic and E blues scale. The phrasing element here is really interesting. And this is something that I spoke about with a few of the guys on a Zoom call last week. Is that, phrasing is a difficult thing and it's sometimes causes you to fall at the first hurdle when you're first starting to kind of jump into improvisation. And phrasing, it's best to think of it like a conversation. It's best to think of it kind of like a call and response. And that's why space is such a good idea. And you can see here, there's a bit of space there, and then there's an answer. Okay, and then with this descent that we just talked about, where it kind of goes down and then back up and then further down again, this is a way that you can run the scale and you can get some mileage out of it melodically by being kind of creative with the way that you're doing it. So you can see it as a line. It's going down and then back up again and then down again. And one of the things that I used to do with my guitar teacher at jazz college was he would draw a line, just any line on a page, and then he would ask me to follow that line with my soloing. So I would have to follow that curve of going up and down with a scale. And then sometimes he'll put breaks in the line to indicate that I needed to have more space in there. And this is a really, really beautiful way of teaching you how to have a melodic contour and include space in your soloing. Otherwise, it will just sound like a ream of notes, and people are going to switch off to that after a while. a barrage of notes is not enjoyable to listen to. So why not try getting a piece of paper out in front of you, assume that you're using the E minor pentatonic scale as your palette, and then draw a line, just any old curve, that you think looks nice and that you think might sound nice. And then follow that line with your scale. And then after that, put some breaks in for space. Horn players have it much easier because they physically have to take a break and include space, which is why Miles was so good with his phrasing, because they have to take the horn away from their mouth to breathe. We don't have to do that. So one way that you can remedy that is by breathing whilst you're playing. So hold your breath while you play a line, and then you physically have to stop when you have to take a breath. And that will force you into phrasing. And the other way is, like I said, a conversation, to think of it like a call and response. So think of yourself like split in twos, two different people having a conversation. You say something, take a break, say something else, take a break. Then you maybe restate the question as the other person, take a break, and then the other person responds in a slightly different way to the way they played last time. Take a look at the last video for an exercise on that. So if we move into the last 4 bars of the solo, Kenny brings back more of those dyads again. Okay, so we've got those thirds there, and then he uses a major third there rather than a minor third, which we looked at in the earlier in this episode with the exercise. He actually uses a major here, so okay, so really, really cool way of changing up the use of dyads with the thirds there. You can interchange the C and the A for C sharp and A, and it will still work and would be nice and bluesy. And then that melismatic line comes back again. And then again, this is another example of him kind of like going down and then stopping, pausing, and then going down a bit further again. So okay, finishing the phrase there, okay? And then, obviously, we've got this fun legato line next time. So, some things to take away from this. The first thing is the use of dyads, okay? So the thirds, okay, using the minor scale, and also interchanging to make it sound slightly more major. The C for the C sharp to make it sound more major, okay? And then also, on the top 2 strings, you've got the option of the fourths with the cheeky third, and you can use all of those. The next thing, as well as learning your minor pentatonic in different positions and learning the blues scale, the other thing is your phrasing. So some little tips that I gave that I've picked up from this particular solo is phrasing in 2 bars, so like a call and response, so 2 bar kind of germs I call them, and then also using an idea of like the arc of your phrasing. So see it as almost like a line on a piece of paper. You could draw it on a piece of paper, draw a line, a single line with lots of ups and downs, and then try and follow that using your palette of minor pentatonic. And then you could add some breaks in there to add in some phrasing. The other way that you can train yourself into phrasing better is by holding your breath, just like a horn player would do when they're playing a line. And then they are forced to pull the horn away to take some breath. We obviously don't have to do that as guitarists, but if you hold your breath, then when you need to take a breath, then stop playing. And that is your phrasing there. And then come back in. And it gives you a really good visual idea and bodily idea of phrasing, okay, which is something we kind of disembodied a little bit when we play guitar, less so than a horn, because you need your breath to be able to play. So we only use our hands as a part of our body when we're playing guitar. So we're slightly kind of disembodied when we're playing. So the act of holding your breath, and then when you need to take a breath and you stop playing, connects you more to the guitar and connects you more to the phrasing. So try those things this week with this next 16 bars. We're going to continue on. We've got 2 more episodes looking at this solo, and then we'll be going back into the head and finishing this particular series. So good luck with your practicing this week. Do drop me a comment below if you've got a question or you want to, counter me on something. Head over to Patreon. The link is on the screen here if you want to grab the backing track and the transcriptions and any of the exercises that I've put on screen here. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. So I will see you next week for the next installment. Bye.